Hello and welcome to the third and final day along my Wherryman's Way adventure. Now I've just left Loddon behind me with its fantastic Grade 1 listed Church of Holy Trinity, which dates to the late 15th century, and I've got about 5 miles to go before I get to Reedham, which is my next settlement, and then it's river all the way along until I join Breydon Water at Berney Arms, where there used to be a pub but sadly there no longer is, and the spectacular Berney Arms mill, which should look spectacular in the sun. And then I follow Breydon Water all the way to the end at Great Yarmouth. Now I've just arrived in the tiny hamlet of Heckingham, which consists of only a couple of houses and a farm or two. But here is the church of St Gregory. St Gregory's church dates to the 12th century and is Grade 1 listed, and it has a lovely round tower. So the Wherryman's Way actually follows country lanes down to Reedham Ferry, and I'm on a slightly higher ridge of land, and I've had a view to Reedham itself, and I can also see Hardley Mill that I passed yesterday. I saw Hardley Flood earlier. I can see Hardley Church, and just ahead is Norton Mill. Now I don't think it's listed, but it dates to 1863 and has had some restorations done. Now, the mill itself is actually only about 100 metres or so in a straight line away from Hardley Cross, where I was at yesterday. But you have to take this sort of 7-mile detour all the way inland and then back out again because there's no crossing of the river there. So I'm just coming up to Reedham Ferry now, and it's actually the only place you can cross the river between Great Yarmouth and Norwich. Now historically there used to be lots of passenger ferries at numerous places, all of which have closed, and I say this is the only one that is now operational. Just be prepared that you do have to pay to use it. I think for passengers at the moment it's only 50p. So I've just crossed the river at Reedham Ferry, and historically the route actually used to follow the riverbank just over here. Now you can see there's still some gates over there, and it went in front of this lovely mill. Now, there's a public right of way all the way up to the houses, but there's a short section of permissive footpath, and sadly that was closed a couple of years ago, so they've had to divert the route along the road into Reedham now. Reedham really is a lovely little village with a shop, a couple of pubs and also a train station. So if you wanted to, you could end your third day here and use the train service to either Great Yarmouth or Norwich to stay overnight. Just as you leave Reedham, you notice that over here the river actually splits. Now the right hand fork is called Haddiscoe New Cut, and it was dug in 1833 to provide a more direct route from Lowestoft to Norwich. So the riverbank path to Berney Arms follows a couple of miles of this riverbank here. I can see Reedham behind me and Reedham Church just over here. And if I show you this way, it's roughly 2 miles to the halfway point at Polkey's Mill just there. And then if you look further round, right on the horizon, you might be able to make out Berney Arms. That's about 4 miles from Reedham. And then it's probably another 4.5 miles from there to Great Yarmouth. So when walking this section, you'll notice the vast areas of reed bed on the right, which border the river. Now they actually cut the reeds, you can see here, on a cycle every few years. And it stops the river becoming clogged up with the reed. And it also provides a lovely area for redshank and oyster catcher to feed, as it creates these shallow pools. So roughly 2 miles from Reedham, and you arrive here at 7 Mile House, which looks like it probably might have been an old pub or something like that with a public key, which closed long ago, but I can't be sure. And you've got Polkey's Mill here. This is Grade 2 star listed and dates to the mid-19th century. Now what's different about this mill is that it actually rotated clockwise rather than anti-clockwise, and the interior has been recently restored, which is why it's been given that extra level of protection. Very close by, you've got Cadges mill as well, which is mid-19th century and grade 2 listed. Clearly not in as good condition with no sails. And I've also noticed way over the back of there, there's actually a third mill. So there's 3 mills all very close to each other. But I can't find any history on this small one, which only looks like it's 2 or 3 stories high with no cap and no sails. But it's a lovely area, and it's only 2 more miles until I get to Berney Arms. I've come a couple of 100 metres since Cadges and Polkey's mill just over there, and you come across another mill, but this one's in a far poorer condition. So this one is Haddiscoe Mill. It actually marks 6 Mile House, and that was 7 Mile House, although I'm not convinced there's a mile between them. The mill is grade 2 listed and dates to the mid-19th century and stands at about 4 stories high. I can see still some of the original workings and stuff near the cap, but it is in a very, very sorry state. Very close now to Berney Arms mill, and I can see it just around the corner. But first there's one more mill before I reach there, and that is Red Mill, just ahead over there. So Red Mill dates to the late 19th century and is grade 2 listed and stands at 4 stories tall, so it's very similar to all the other mills that are along this stretch of river. Right next door is Raven Hall. That's also grade 2 listed and has been dated to 1700. So it's a particularly old house to be right down on the riverbank. So I've just arrived here at Berney Arms Mill, and you can see it is truly enormous. I think it stands at 71 feet high and is reportedly one of the tallest windmills in Norfolk, although there is one mill over at Sutton which I think might be slightly taller, though it's never officially been measured. So the mill is a scheduled ancient monument and is owned and managed by English Heritage. It is one of the most spectacular mills that you'll see in Norfolk. Just behind me now you can see the old pub at Berney Arms, and sadly it has closed. It closed a few years ago and it looks rather derelict at the moment, and I don't think there's any plans for it to be reopened. Now when you are walking this section though along the Berney Arms, take a look to the other side of the river. So it's lit up at the moment in the sunlight, although it's now going into the shade. There is a Roman fort up there. That is at Borough Castle. Now if you want to explore that, the Angles Way, which goes from Great Yarmouth all the way to Thetford, heads right past it. Now the fort, although some of it has been washed away because of erosion, has some of the tallest and most intact Roman walls in the country. It dates to I think the 2nd or 3rd century and was one of a series of forts along the shore, including one just up the road at Caister-on-Sea, one right round on the Norfolk coast at Brancaster, and then further down at things like Felixstowe. That was also the site of a Norman Motte and Bailey castle as well, hence the name Borough Castle. Now, in the Norman times, or around the 12th century, the Normans reused the Roman walls that were already present as part of the castle defences. And just think, at that point, when the Normans built the castle, the walls themselves were already nearly 1,000 years old. And it is a truly lovely place to go and visit. So just as I leave Berney Arms, I'm coming up to the very southern end of Breydon Water. Now, Breydon Water is part of a massive nature reserve that's owned and managed by the RSPB, and the water itself covers an area, I think, of 1,200 acres. Now, it is tidal, and at low tide you get vast areas of mudflats which are home to thousands and thousands of birds. Especially in the winter period, it's an internationally important site for overwintering waterfowl. So strolling out alongside Breydon Water here is a prime example of the difference in water height against land height. The tide is in at the moment, but the water level would easily be 1 metre, perhaps even 2 metres deep if it was allowed to breach these defences, and it would go at least 4 or 5 miles inland, all the way over to Eiger and Halvergate on the other side of Berney Marshes here. So all this reclaimed land will be gone. Imagine it being like Poole Harbour, where you'd have a navigable channel, but then the outer stretches of the estuary will be shallow and salt marsh. So this here is Lockgate Drainage Mill. It's another Grade 2 listed mill that stands 4 stories high and dates to the late 19th century. Now, this is actually the last mill encountered on the entire walk. I've got about 3.5 miles left along the estuary, with open marshes on my left and vast open water on my right. I've got flocks of birds going up and down. I've got oyster catchers, I can hear redshanks, and I've got this as company until the end of the walk. Still working my way alongside Breydon Water, and I've just come to this area of salt marsh. You can see how the tide has started to go out and revealing this flat mud area here. Now, it's really important not to rush this last section, because within these little pools and channels are the best places to see some of the wading birds. I've seen, I say, oyster catchers. There's some sitting on a bank over here. I've seen whimbrel, I've seen curlew, redshank. There's also a chance to see things like grey plover and golden plover, and you tend to see those in bigger flocks. So I can also make out Haven Bridge just over there, and the church tower in Great Yarmouth. Now, just behind Haven Bridge is the train station, which marks the official end of the Wherryman's Way. So I'm coming up to the final little stretch of the walk. There's the rumble of the A47 Acle straight behind me, and then just ahead I've got Breydon Water and then Breydon Bridge over there. So I'm going to follow this bank all the way round, past an RSPB bird hide which I've spotted over there, and then there's a little supermarket the other side, and then the train station. So this is it, the train station in Great Yarmouth, marking the official end of my Wherryman's Way adventure. It's been fantastic, starting in Norwich and meandering my way along the River Yare, stopping at Rockland St Mary and Loddon before finally arriving here in Great Yarmouth. It's a route that may not have all the views, but it is rich in history and overflowing with wildlife. It really is a superb walk, and surely one of the best riverside walks in England.